A quiet thought is spreading across America. It usually begins at a kitchen table, not during a crisis, not after one shocking bill, but after years of small calculations that never seem to work. A retired couple adds up Social Security, then savings, then the mortgage, the rent, the insurance, the prescriptions, the groceries, the car, the property taxes, the medical bills. And somewhere in the middle of that math, a sentence appears that many people never expected to say out loud. What if we just left? Not for vacation, not for adventure, but to grow old somewhere else. Mexico, Portugal, Thailand, Costa Rica, Vietnam, Panama, even Japan. For many Americans, retiring abroad is no longer a fantasy about beaches and cheap rent. It is becoming a response to something deeper. The feeling that the country they worked in for 40 years has become too expensive to grow old in. But the story does not end when they leave. Because after the lower rent, the cheaper doctor visits, and the first beautiful mornings in a new country, another question slowly appears. What did they actually leave behind? For a long time, the American retirement story had a shape people understood. You worked for decades. You saved what you could. Maybe you had a pension. Maybe you bought a house. Maybe the house was paid off by the time you stopped working. And if you were careful, retirement would not be luxurious, but it would be stable. That was the promise. Not wealth, not endless travel, just dignity. A modest home, a familiar pharmacy, a doctor you trusted, a neighborhood you knew, a few grandchildren nearby, enough money to pay the bills without checking the account every morning. Millions of Americans built their lives around that promise. They took jobs they did not love because the benefits were steady. They stayed in homes that needed repairs because ownership meant security. They skipped vacations to save for later. They told themselves that later would be the reward. But the rules changed while they were still playing the game. Pensions became less common. Medical costs became more complicated. Housing became more expensive. Insurance stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like another monthly threat. And retirement savings became tied to markets, employers, timing, and luck. So by the time many Americans reach their 60s or 70s, they are not stepping into freedom. They are stepping into a math problem. The uncomfortable part is that they did not fail the old promise. The old promise failed to survive the new cost structure. The average retired American does not need a mansion. They need rent or a mortgage, food, utilities, transportation, healthcare, insurance, medicine. A little money for emergencies, a little money to visit family, a little money to feel human. But the average Social Security check is not built to carry all of that by itself. For many retirees, Social Security is around $2,000 a month. For some, it is more. For others, it is less. Now compare that with the cost of simply existing in many American cities. Rent alone can take half the check, sometimes more. Then comes Medicare premiums, supplemental insurance, prescription drugs, dental work that Medicare often does not cover, eyeglasses, groceries, utilities, car insurance, gas, and the repair that always arrives at the worst possible time. The problem is not one big expense. It is the stack. Each bill has an explanation. The landlord has costs. The pharmacy has prices. The insurer has risk. The grocery store has supply chains. The utility company has rates. But the retiree experiences all of them together. And when the total is bigger than the income, the system offers only a few options. Spend savings faster. Go back to work. Move in with family. Cut needs that should not be cut. Or look somewhere else. That is where retiring abroad enters the picture. Not as a dream, as a pressure release valve. A Social Security check that feels weak in Florida may feel stronger in Mexico. A pension that barely covers rent in California may support a quieter life in Thailand. A modest retirement account that feels fragile in New York may stretch longer in Portugal or Vietnam. The money does not change. The world around the money changes. And for people who have spent years feeling financially cornered, that can feel like oxygen. Robert is 68. Linda is 66. They live outside Tampa, Florida. Robert spent 37 years as a maintenance supervisor. Linda worked in medical billing. They did not live extravagantly. They bought used cars. They rarely carried designer anything. They raised 2 children, helped with college where they could, and assumed that if they stayed careful, retirement would eventually become manageable. Together, they receive about $3,200 a month from Social Security. They have savings, but not enough to draw heavily without fear. Their home is not fully paid off. Their insurance has increased. The roof will need work soon, and Linda's prescriptions cost more than they expected. Here is the monthly structure. Robert and Linda, Tampa area, Florida monthly Social Security income, $3,200. Mortgage, taxes, and homeowner's insurance, $1,850 Medicare premiums and medical reserve, $620 groceries and household basics, $760 utilities, phone and internet, $430 car insurance, gas, and maintenance, $520 prescriptions and dental reserve, $280 credit card minimums, $190 home repairs and emergency reserve, $350. Total core monthly costs, $5,000. Income minus core costs, $3,200. $5,000 equals negative $1,800. This is not a story about bad choices. There is no luxury car in the driveway, no second home, no reckless spending. Just 2 people who worked for decades and reached retirement inside a structure that now costs more than their fixed income can carry. So one evening, Robert searches online. Best places to retire on Social Security. That one search opens a door. Suddenly he sees couples in Mexico living near the beach for less. Retirees in Portugal walking to cafes. Americans in Thailand paying less for doctor visits than they used to pay for insurance copays. People in Vietnam renting modern apartments for a fraction of U.S. prices. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the numbers look possible. That is the emotional force behind this trend. It is not that people suddenly stopped loving America. It is that the spreadsheet stopped loving them back. The internet is very good at selling relief. A retired nurse shows her apartment in Chiang Mai, $500 a month, a pool downstairs, a private hospital nearby, street food that costs less than a fast food meal back home. A former teacher in Portugal walks through a quiet neighborhood, buys fresh bread, drinks coffee outdoors, and says she no longer feels hunted by bills. A couple in Mexico shows a 2-bedroom apartment, a sunny balcony, and a grocery receipt that looks impossible by American standards. These videos are powerful because they are not entirely false. Many people really do find a better daily life abroad. Lower rent, cheaper healthcare, walkable neighborhoods, less financial pressure, more time outside, more social contact, less of the constant American feeling that every normal activity comes with a hidden fee. That is why the dream is so sticky. Because it is not only about saving money, it is about recovering margin. And margin changes how life feels. If rent drops by $800 a month, that is not just cheaper housing. It is a dentist appointment. It is a flight to see grandchildren. It is a cushion when the car breaks. It is the difference between fear and sleep. But there is a danger in comparing a carefully selected life abroad with the most expensive version of life at home. A small city in Mexico is not the same as San Diego. A walkable town in Portugal is not the same as Miami. A furnished apartment in Thailand is not the same as a suburban house with property taxes and insurance. The comparison may still be valid, but it is not always complete, because vacation energy is not the same as permanent life, and the first year abroad is often the easiest year to misunderstand. For many retirees, the first years abroad can feel like a second life. The pressure lifts, the weather helps, the money stretches. Everyday errands feel new. There are cafes, markets, new friends, slower mornings. But somewhere around the third or fourth year, a different feeling can appear. Not regret exactly, not loneliness in the simple sense, something harder to name. The feeling of belonging partly everywhere and fully nowhere. Imagine a retired school administrator named Margaret. She moves to Portugal at 68. For the first 3 years, it feels like rescue. She walks more than she has in a decade. Her rent is manageable. Her doctor appointments are not financially terrifying. She meets other expats. She learns the neighborhood. She feels lighter. Then her closest friend back in Ohio gets sick. A visit home means a long flight, airport stress, time zone fatigue, and money she did not plan to spend that month. Her grandchildren grow older through video calls. Her old neighborhood changes. A favorite restaurant closes. A neighbor dies. Her children are busy with jobs, mortgages, and children of their own. Nothing dramatic happens. That is what makes it so quiet. The old life simply keeps moving without her. And one day, she realizes that the place she left is no longer waiting exactly as she remembered it. But the new place is not fully hers either. She is not unhappy. She is not desperate. But she is suspended between two lives. This is the part most retirement abroad videos do not show well. The money can work. The lifestyle can improve. The weather can be beautiful. And still, the emotional geography can become complicated. Because home is not just where the rent is affordable. Home is where your history still recognizes you. Healthcare is often the most misunderstood part of retiring abroad. Many Americans spend their working lives assuming Medicare will be there in old age. And inside the United States, it usually is. But outside the United States, Medicare coverage is extremely limited. In most cases, it does not pay for care abroad. This does not mean healthcare abroad is bad. In many countries, private hospitals are excellent. Doctors may be well trained. Appointments may be faster. Prices may be far lower than in the United States. Some retirees say they receive better routine care abroad than they did at home. But the question changes as people age. At 66, a person may need checkups and prescriptions. At 76, they may need specialists. At 86, they may need emergency care, mobility support, cancer treatment, heart care, or long-term assistance. That is when the real issue appears. Can you navigate the system when you are scared? Can you explain your symptoms in another language? Can you understand the treatment plan? Can you afford international insurance if premiums rise? Can you return to the United States for major care if your body no longer handles long flights? Can your spouse manage everything alone if you become medically fragile? The danger is not that healthcare abroad cannot work. It often can. The danger is assuming that cheaper healthcare automatically means simpler healthcare. A retired person can leave behind American medical bills, but they may also leave behind the medical system they know how to navigate. And when you are older, familiarity itself becomes a form of protection. Many Americans imagine that leaving the United States means leaving the American system behind. But the system has a longer reach than people expect. U.S. citizens generally still have federal tax filing obligations even if they live abroad. Foreign bank accounts can create additional reporting requirements. Some foreign banks do not want American clients because U.S. compliance rules create extra work. Some retirees discover that opening a simple checking account is harder than renting an apartment. Others learn that financial institutions back home may not like foreign addresses. A move that was supposed to simplify life can suddenly create a second layer of administration. Tax forms, residency permits, visa renewals, foreign bank rules, healthcare documents, currency transfers, proof of income, proof of insurance, translations, appointments, deadlines. None of this is exciting. That is why it rarely appears in the beautiful videos. But this is where many retirement dreams become real life. The sunset is real. So is the paperwork. The affordable rent is real. So is the visa renewal. The cafe is real. So is the tax return. Most retirees can manage it. But the gap between the dream and the administrative reality is large enough that people should see it before they move, not after. Because at 72, starting over is not just emotional. It is logistical. Most people assume retiring abroad is only about cheap countries. But then Japan enters the conversation. Japan is not usually the cheapest option. The language barrier is real. The culture can be demanding. The rules may be complex. And yet, Japan attracts a meaningful number of older Americans living abroad. That fact reveals something important. Not every retiree is searching only for low prices. Some are searching for function, clean streets, reliable trains, low crime, public order, quietness, a sense that ordinary systems still work. For Americans who have grown tired of constant friction, broken infrastructure, unsafe streets, unreliable services, expensive healthcare, unpredictable bills, Japan represents something that is hard to price. The relief of trust. Trust that the train will come. Trust that the street will be clean. Trust that people will generally respect shared space. Trust that daily life will not require a low-level defensive posture all the time. That is why this trend is not just about cost of living. It is about quality of life. For some retirees, Mexico offers proximity and affordability. Thailand offers low costs and strong private healthcare. Portugal offers calm and walkability. Vietnam offers energy and low daily expenses. Japan offers function. Different countries are answering different parts of the same American question. Where can I grow old without feeling like life is constantly pushing back? There is a strange gap in this story. Many Americans have seriously considered retiring abroad, but only a small share actually do it. That gap is not ignorance. It is reality. Selling a home is difficult. Leaving family is difficult. Learning a new system is difficult. Managing healthcare abroad is difficult. Filing taxes from another country is difficult. Starting over at 25 is one thing. Starting over at 72 is another. And there is one reason that ends more conversations than any spreadsheet ever could. Family. A move abroad sounds reasonable until something happens to someone you love. A daughter has a health scare. A grandchild is born. A spouse dies. A friend needs help. A funeral happens suddenly. What used to be a 40-minute drive becomes an international flight, booked in panic, at full price, with layovers, with a tired body, with the quiet guilt of being far away. For many retirees, that image is enough. They may still be financially squeezed in America. They may still know that their money would stretch further somewhere else. But they stay because the difficulty they know feels safer than the possibility they do not. That is not irrational. It is human. People can carry familiar hardship longer than unfamiliar freedom, especially when the cost of being wrong has become so high. The people retiring abroad are not all the same. Some are adventurous. Some are practical. Some are lonely. Some are excited. Some are scared. Some are wealthy enough to choose comfort anywhere. Others are moving because the numbers left them no better option. But taken together, their choices point to something larger. When a country produces enough wealth, but many of its older citizens still have to search overseas for a dignified retirement, the issue is not only personal finance. It is system design. A society tells people to work, save, buy homes, pay taxes, contribute, and wait. Then, decades later, many of those same people discover that the final chapter costs more than the life they prepared for. That is why retirement abroad has become more than a lifestyle trend. It is a signal. A quiet signal. No protest signs. No national breaking news moment. No single dramatic collapse. Just a slow accumulation of people opening laptops, comparing rent in another country, checking visa rules, watching apartment tours, and wondering whether the life they were promised might now exist somewhere else. Some will go, most will stay. But both groups are responding to the same pressure. The people who leave are asking whether another country can offer them what America no longer does, at a price they can afford. The people who stay are asking how much smaller their retirement can become before it stops feeling like retirement at all. And that is the deeper story. Not beaches, not cheap rent, not travel. A promise that once felt ordinary has become uncertain. And millions of Americans are now old enough to notice. For some Americans, retiring abroad will be the best decision they ever make. They will find community. They will find lower costs. They will find better weather, better healthcare experiences, and a daily rhythm that gives them back a part of themselves. For others, the move will bring complications they did not fully understand. Distance, paperwork, healthcare uncertainty, language barriers, family guilt, the slow feeling of becoming a guest in two places at once. But beneath all of those individual outcomes is one question that is larger than any destination. Why are so many Americans looking outside the United States for a retirement they can afford? That question does not need to be shouted. It does not need to become political. It only needs to be taken seriously. Because when people who work their whole lives begin searching for dignity somewhere else, they are not just moving. They are revealing what their own country has made difficult to keep.